A man walked into a consulate and never came out. On the 2nd of October 2018, Jamal Khashoggi entered the Saudi Consulate in Istanbul to collect documents for his upcoming marriage. What happened inside that building triggered a multinational criminal investigation, a diplomatic crisis, and one of the most widely examined political killings of the century. The facts that emerged from Turkish prosecutors, Saudi government statements, United Nations investigators, and leading intelligence agencies reveal a killing carried out by a coordinated team of Saudi operatives. Yet the highest levels of responsibility, the chain of command, and the location of Khashoggi's remains remain unresolved. Jamal Khashoggi spent decades in Saudi media and political circles. He worked as an editor, a correspondent, and a commentator with deep access to the ruling establishment. In the 1980s and 1990s, he reported on regional conflicts and interviewed figures others could not reach. He served as a media advisor to senior Saudi officials and maintained relationships across government and intelligence networks. Over time, his reporting became more critical, especially as the Saudi leadership consolidated power. His commentary warned of mass arrests, shrinking space for debate, and the risks of concentrated authority. By 2017, he left Saudi Arabia voluntarily and began writing from the United States, publishing columns that openly critiqued government policies and the climate of fear inside the kingdom. In interviews, he stated plainly that he wanted reform, not revolution, but believed the leadership had taken a direction that endangered basic freedoms. His public profile grew, and with it, the displeasure of the state he was criticizing. On the day of his death, Khashoggi arrived at the Saudi Consulate in Istanbul for a routine bureaucratic matter. His fiancée waited outside with his phone as he entered the building. He never reappeared. Turkish police confirmed that surveillance cameras outside the compound recorded his arrival, but showed no footage of him leaving. Saudi officials initially insisted he had exited through a back door, but no evidence supported that claim. Turkish authorities began treating the case as a possible abduction within days, and prosecutors formally opened a criminal investigation after access to consular premises was requested. As hours turned into days, conflicting statements from Saudi officials deepened suspicion and set the stage for international scrutiny. Saudi Arabia's official narrative changed several times. In the first week, Saudi representatives claimed Khashoggi had walked out of the consulate unharmed. After Turkish investigators disputed this publicly, Saudi authorities acknowledged he had died inside, but described his death as accidental, result of a physical altercation that escalated unexpectedly. Later statements identified a group of Saudi officials involved in the operation, but depicted them as acting without authorization, describing the killing as the work of rogue operatives. Saudi prosecutors eventually announced that several suspects would be tried inside Saudi Arabia. Throughout these announcements, the Saudi government denied that senior leadership had prior knowledge of or involvement in the killing. Turkish investigators released detailed findings contradicting the early Saudi explanations. Turkish officials stated that Khashoggi was killed shortly after he entered the consulate. They reported possessing audio obtained from within the building that captured the sounds of the attack, including Khashoggi's pleas and his loss of consciousness, followed by the noise of dismemberment. Turkish prosecutors identified a 15-member Saudi team that flew into Istanbul on government-linked aircraft ahead of the killing, entered the consulate before Khashoggi's arrival, and left within hours after the operation. Forensic investigators reported evidence consistent with a violent struggle, including traces discovered during chemical analysis after freshly applied paint was removed from interior surfaces. They concluded that Khashoggi's body was dismembered and removed from the consulate in multiple containers. Despite extensive searches around Istanbul, including forested areas and private properties, no remains were found. A United Nations investigation, led by the Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial, Summary or Arbitrary Executions, concluded that Khashoggi's killing was a premeditated, extrajudicial execution for which the Saudi state bore responsibility. The UN inquiry found that the operation required significant coordination, resources, and planning, including surveillance of Khashoggi before his arrival. The report stated that senior Saudi officials had created the conditions that enabled the killing, and that the state had failed to meet its international obligations to investigate transparently and cooperate with other authorities. Intelligence agencies reached their own conclusions. A publicly released assessment from the United States intelligence community stated with high confidence that the operation that resulted in Khashoggi's death was approved by the Crown Prince. This assessment drew on the Crown Prince's control over security and intelligence services, communications intercepted before and after the killing, and the involvement of individuals directly linked to the royal court security apparatus. Other intelligence services, while not all releasing public summaries, indicated through official statements or reporting that they shared similar assessments. Regarding the likelihood of high-level authorization, evidence tying the operatives to the Saudi state is extensive. The team members identified by Turkish authorities included officials connected to the royal court, the intelligence services, and the Crown Prince's personal security detail. Their travel arrangements were made on state-linked aircraft. Records showed that consular staff were instructed to vacate certain rooms shortly before Khashoggi arrived. After the killing, Saudi agents attempted to remove forensic evidence through cleaning and chemical treatment, as confirmed by both Turkish and UN investigators. The Saudi trials that followed acknowledged the involvement of multiple operatives, but did not address the higher command structure that organized the team. Contradictions appear when comparing Saudi statements to independent findings. The claim of a spontaneous fight conflicts with the documented arrival of a specialized team equipped and trained for covert operations. The assertion that the killing was unauthorized stands at odds with the operatives' institutional affiliations and the level of coordination involved. Saudi judicial proceedings were conducted behind closed doors, and sentences were later reduced or commuted. Senior officials named in Turkish indictments and international reports were not publicly charged. These discrepancies have contributed to sustained concerns about a lack of transparency and accountability. Significant questions remain unanswered. The whereabouts of Khashoggi's remains are still unknown, preventing forensic confirmation of the exact method of killing and eliminating the possibility of an independent autopsy. The full hierarchy behind the decision, including who conceived the operation, who approved it, and who coordinated the cover-up, has never been disclosed in a credible public forum. International calls for an open, independent investigation have not been met. Saudi Arabia maintains that those responsible have been prosecuted, while multiple governments, organizations, and investigators state that key decision-makers have not faced justice. What is confirmed is that Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside the Saudi Consulate in Istanbul by a coordinated team of Saudi operatives. Official Turkish findings, United Nations reporting, and major intelligence assessments agree that the killing was premeditated and linked to the Saudi state. What remains disputed is the full extent of command responsibility, and what remains unresolved is whether those at the highest levels of authority will ever be held accountable. His disappearance inside a diplomatic building became a defining case of transnational repression, raising enduring questions about power, impunity, and the limits of international justice. The world knows how Jamal Khashoggi entered the consulate. It still does not know what became of his remains, nor whether the full truth of who ordered his killing will ever be brought into the open.